some of you heard about my story. Yes, I'm Robert King, one of the only freed member of the Angola Three, and I want to probably begin by maybe answering questions, because I know you have a lot of questions in your mind, and I don't have a lot of time, so I'll just get off into my story as best as I can. But yes, I did. You know, I did 31 years in prison, 29 in solitary confinement. And I must admit that there was a precedent that was set at that time in my life. Because prior to that time, I went along with traditions, believing that things were what they were, believing that the order of things were just the way they needed to be. And as a result of that, I did not question some things. I did not question legality. At one time, I thought that legality, when something was legal, it was determined legal, it was in fact whole. It was morally whole. It was correct. It was something to be looked upon or inspiring you. It was something that was legal. If it was legal, it was legal. And legal was a precedent. Legality was God. But I found out in life that that there is an opposite side to legality. Again, some people feel that legality and morality are synonymous. But I'm here to tell you that the two are not synonymous. They don't shake hands, not in the courthouse, especially in the courthouse. Of course, there are, segments of legality that implies and has morality. But for those of us who believe wholeheartedly that legality and morality are synonymous, then listen to my story. Again, as I pointed out, I was convicted for an armed robbery in which I had not committed, and I was given a 35-year sentence, and I was sent to Angola. And while in Angola, I was placed under investigation for a crime in which I had not committed. I was placed in a 6 by 9 by 12-foot cell, and I was there for 23 hours. I was there for 23 hours a day. You wonder, some of you, the question that I want to answer, some of you wonder why or how I survived. By the time they sent me to prison, I ain't gonna say I went to prison. They sent me to prison because I didn't go willingly. By the time they sent me to prison, I had become politically conscious, politically aware of what was going on in the society in which I live in, which is America. And this was in 1970, you have to, must admit, because at that time, it was the height of the civil rights era. There were many groups coming on the set. There were many groups who had defined the Constitution as applicable to them, but was not getting this, the amenities that the Constitution required. And as a result, there was a lot of protests. There was a lot of protests. Some of you know about the war in Vietnam, and there were a lot of killing in Kent State. National Guards killed Kent State students. They killed students at Ohio State, Jackson State, and in other parts of the country. So there was a lot of change in the air. And, at this time, not being able to articulate or define what was going on, I had begun to feel a part of what was taking place. So I think all of the things that I experienced was something that, I don't know, I don't want to call it divine, but I think in the final analysis, it ended up being sort of like divinity. Because once in prison, I had to change my mindset about prison. Some want to know, well, why didn't you go crazy? How you came out sane? Usually when people ask me that question, or when people make that assumption, I retort back to them. I let them know, wait a minute, I did not tell you I was sane. I did not tell you that. It's impossible to get dipped in waste and not come up stinking. But what I did do was, even though I was dipped in waste and I came up stinking, I think I was able to kind of wash myself off, philosophical-wise. I had changed my mind about America, again, I saw America as being one big prison. And I had been plucked from society and placed in a maximum security setting, which was prison. And I felt that everybody else in America who was not in prison was in minimum custody in society. So making this equation, I think I was able to kind of survive my environment. But I think I did more than that in order to survive. Because I did not just change my mindset about America, but I also became politically aware of what was going on in society. I learned the historical significance of African people in America. I learned of what took place back during Chattel. I learned what allegedly took place to eliminate Chattel, and I began to make the connection. I began to see that, well, they say slavery was abolished, but I began to see prison as being placed on the slavery plane, because some people think that the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The language, you read the language, it tells you about the 13th Amendment, slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist on these shores except one is duly convicted of a crime and blah, 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 and so forth. But that insertion, being duly convicted of a crime, it really plants the seed for perpetual slavery, because people, as it turned out, have been convicted for crimes and sent to prison. Some have died in prison. Some remain in prison now. My two comrades, Herman and Albert, are in prison now, 38 years, 40 years nearly, in solitary confinement in a 6 by 9 by 12-foot cell, convicted for a crime that neither committed, only because they were trying to change. They were members of the Black Panther Party, of course. They were targeted because they were trying to implement change in a setting such as Angola. Angola State Prison at the time was considered the worst prison in the nation. And Herman and Albert, they went there being members of the Black Panther Party. They wanted to change this environment. As a result, they were targeted. But they remained in prison. They paid dearly. As a result, I paid dearly. I was not even in prison during the time in which the charge in which they were eventually charged and falsely convicted of. I was not even in prison. Had not been in prison for months. Nevertheless, when they shipped me back to Angola, they placed me under investigation for this crime. I had never been placed in the prison population, and as a result of that, they sent me. I was under investigation for 29 years, and they could not charge me with this particular crime. They could not charge me, but they had me under investigation, so they kept me in a solitary confinement-like setting. But they were able to get someone to say that I had participated in the death of another inmate. And as a result of that, I was subsequently indicted. I was sent to trial. I was found guilty. I was given a life sentence. But I must admit, by this time, I had changed my mindset about what the prison was, what it meant, how it affected me. It was almost by this time like water on a duck. This is what I told myself, because I was in prison and I know I needed to do some things, maintain my sanity to get out of prison. So again, I think my mindset about prison, the thing that how I made the connection with my prison, with the people out in society, with the thing that had taken place, the thing that was going on in society. I think this sort of helped me weather the storm of prison. But I think the most important thing about my being in prison was I had developed the mindset that I was in prison, or even though I was in prison, I say that prison was not going to be in me. I did not allow prison to be in me. And I do think there is a difference. I also made the equation and the connection, and I felt this, that if there is a prison, I think there is a physical prison that, confines us, and it keeps us physically. But there is this psychological and this mental prison, not just in society, but in prison. Within the prison, you have this. But in society, if you don't have this physical confinement, you do have this other form of imprisonment. There were people out here that I felt were in economic slavery or imprisonment. They was in political, being deprived of politics socially. They was socially deprived of civility or civil liberties. And as a result, these people themselves were in prison, but many did not really realize. So making this equation, it was okay for me, I felt, to be in prison. It was okay for me to rise. Again, like I say, I was in prison, but prison wasn't in me. I began to continue to question. I continue to make the connection. I continue to see that back to the point of that which is legal and that which is moral. I began to make the connection. I saw it doing Chattel, how it wasn't until the people took a position of Chattel being something that was morally repugnant. This is the only reason why slavery, as we knew it at that time, was abolished. It was as a result of people taking a moral position, seeing prison as being morally, seeing slavery rather as being morally repugnant. And as a result of seeing slavery as being morally repugnant, something was done about it. And I made the connection, and I feel that people today, there are people in prison, in slavery, and the only way they can become maybe free, or the possibility of revisiting slavery on the prison plane, is for us to make the connection to see that slavery still is a big part of the American society, because you can be found guilty for a crime in which you did not commit, played no part in it. You could be sentenced for the rest of your life in prison. And if you go to Angola State Prison, you are in Angola State Prison if you get a life sentence. And Angola State Prison is considered the biggest prison, maximum security prison in the nation. So if you are sent there, the idea is that you will never be released. But if you go there with a life sentence, or if you go to Angola with a death sentence, it means one thing, that you will never get out of prison. It means this, that the state owns you. If you die in Angola, they do not have to give your body to your folks. So if you went to prison, convicted for a crime in which you had not committed, and if you were given a life sentence, you die in prison, and your folks don't have to get your body. So I think we have to make the equation, we have to make the connection, we have to see that even though my two friends, other people who are there in prison, who at that time became political prisoners because they were targeted as being enemy of the state, they are in prison, convicted for crime that they did not commit, and they are legal slaves. And the only way that they can be released from this, I mean, we could cry prison reform or prison abolishment or however you want to do it, but the only way they can be released from these confinements is I think we have to make the connection, because the prison itself is not going to change. I think the idea, what I learned was this, and when I left prison, I said I was free of Angola, but I made the proclamation that Angola would never be free of me. And since that time, from day one, and don't want to brag about the things that I've done, but to attest to the fact that I meant what I said, and that I was really dedicated and sincere in my newfound belief, that since that time I've been out here and I've came out, some people say running, and I've traveled, the world over. And I've spoken about prison. I've spoken about my two comrades specifically, Herman and Albert, who remain in prison. I've also spoken about other political prisoners, but I also speak out against prison, period, because the prison today is used as a means of stifling people. The prison today is used as a means of warehousing people. I would say one thing that really got me to the point of knowing that if I ever got out of prison, I could not come out and live a sedated lifestyle. I was brought back to a small place in Louisiana called Emmet, Louisiana. We had won a new trial for Albert Woodfox. And the thing that I saw gave me more determination to do the things that I have subsequently done. what I saw was a prison that had been built for about 500 inmates, but it was housing 1,200 inmates. The majority of them, the average age was 25. 95% was young African American. But I learned that in Louisiana, when I first went to prison, that there were only a couple of prisons, maybe one or two. Now there are 12. But the population became so engrossed and so large, they could not contain them in the prison that they had built. So the legislators, in their prerogative, enacted laws that allow certain detention centers erected around the counties in Louisiana. They are called parishes. And in those parishes, there are many jails. There are 64 parishes in the jail. And I found out that when those jails got empty, what they would do, the state would give something like $70,000 for an elderly inmate to maintain him, and about $40-some thousand for a younger inmate to maintain them. I found out that a lot of these young men did not want to go to Angola because they were scared to go to Angola, but they kept them in the parish prison. And in keeping them in the parish prison, they forced them to confess to crime, gave them probation, sent them out into the streets. And when the jail got empty and when the sheriff felt that the coffers of his money was dropped, he sent his sheriff back out into the street to pick up these men so they could continue to draw this money from inmates that were being, the legislature had provided for sheriff in these detention centers to have. And so I vowed, and I made a vow, and I thought about it. I said, well, there are 64 parishes in Louisiana. I said, if you multiply this or you replicate this, just think how much money that is being used or that is being made on the back of prisoners who, many of them, and some of them, as a result of racist DA, as a result of DA who have an interest in prison, the prison industrial complex, they have interest, and they make sure that the warehouses are full of items, full of product, full of goods, and the goods of prison. So I made the determination that even though I was free of Angola, Angola would never be free of me. I saw Angola as being a prison, and I saw Angola as being a place that was sucking up young people, or sucking up the lives, especially of young African Americans, and it has gone beyond that point. Because now, at one time, it was directed at African America, but now it's directed at everyone. So I think the idea for me, and my quest is to shed light, continue to shed light on prison, focus on my two comrades, but give an overall view, or make the connection between prison and slavery, and try to convince people that the 13th Amendment, in fact, did not abolish slavery. In fact, it made slavery much more legal. It put it on the prison plan, and that's where it is today. Hopefully, I can get you to see that there's a connection between prison today and prison of old, which was slavery for many people. And it impacts not just a segment in ethnic group, but a combination of people, all ethnicity, including whites, yellow, red, black, and so forth and so on. And so the quest is to eliminate prison in the form in which we know it, to shed light on it, to see that's being repulsive. And that is my quest, and I think I am about up with my time. I don't know. I think I went over. But I hope I made my point. Thank you, God.